Hi friends, it's Shuba. Welcome back to my channel. The last time I published a reading wrap-up was all the way back in April for my March books that I read. I skipped April because I figured I would do April and May together moving forward, so 2 months at a time. And I'm here sitting now in June thinking about the books that I read in April, and I can't form words for them. So I'm no longer going to attempt to do a 2-month reading wrap-up. I don't know how people do it. I read a lot of books, and instead today we're going to be talking about all of the books that I read in May. I read 8 books total, and I DNF'd 1 book. If you watch some of my reading vlogs in May, you'll probably know the book that I DNF'd, and you've probably heard me talk about some of these books before, but this is just a quick all-encompassing summary of the books that I read in May. Let's get right into it. We're gonna start with fiction. The first book we're going to talk about is Saving Face by Muncie Shaw. I was gifted this book by Muncie Shaw herself to be on her street team as a reader. The book comes out in August. Exact date will be up top. I loved this book. This is considered a rags to riches fiction story about an orphan who steals the identity of her rich classmate and makes a life for herself in America. We follow our main character 20 years later in America. She is the head of this giant skincare company. She is making a name for herself and she's doing well, but her past is back to haunt her. Now, as her past is catching back up to her, we are reading from her as she retells how she came to America and what she did to do all of that. It's quite insane. If you're a fan of Inventing Anna, The Dropout, or Yellowface by R.F. Kuang, you're gonna love this book. I really loved it. What I found most interesting is that normally when we read of a main character, we love the main character. We're supposed to like them. However, in this story, and similar to what I compared it to, I don't like Umi. I don't like our main character. We are supposed to not like her. She's unlikable based on the actions that she has taken to kind of make her way to the top. I didn't want her to get in trouble, which is weird because we know that she isn't the best person and she doesn't have the best morals. I still was hoping that she could get away with whatever she was getting away with, and I don't want to spoil anything else and go beyond what I had just mentioned about the plot. This is a twisty mystery story, and I was laughing out loud at specific parts because our main character is really quirky and funny. However, there's also some historical elements woven into the story, and it really sheds light on how orphans were treated in Singapore and how they're still treated, and I found that to be very educational. I also have traveled to Singapore before with my family a few years ago, so I've been there. I haven't necessarily seen the cathedrals or exact places where the story takes place, but it was really interesting to read from a setting where I've been to and I've experienced before. Overall, this is a wonderful story, and it has themes of class and power and how they intersect not only in Singapore but worldwide, because Umi does come to America, and also it just talks about socioeconomical standards and just how women in America are treated, whether you are white, whether you are Asian. It's just very eye-opening to read from a business side of how a woman is treated, especially when she is somebody who is so well known and has so much power in the industry that she's in. I recommend this book. I loved it so much. Now let's talk about the fantasy books that I read in May. Well of Ascension by Brandon Sanderson. This is the second book in the Mistborn trilogy. I buddy read this with Chelsea. We're making our way through the trilogy. We have 1 more to go in the series, obviously because it's a trilogy. Yes. The first book in this series is more of a revolution story with a little bit of heist element. And this book is the aftermath of a revolution. It's the aftermath of taking down the throne. It's the aftermath of destroying the government and society that we are in. So very interesting perspective. I feel like a lot of the times when we have these stories where our main character is overthrowing the government, our main character is destroying evil and taking the throne, you don't get the aftermath. It's just a happily ever after. I'm thinking specifically Lord of the Rings. You have this giant war that's been brewing, and then after the war, at the end of the movie of Return of the King, Aragorn is crowned and everyone's happy and goes off and does their own thing. In this story, we're seeing just how the politics changes due to this aftermath of overthrowing the revolution involved, and it's just very interesting. I've said that already. It is more on the slower side because of it. I felt like the pacing was a little bit off. I feel like Brandon Sanderson left all of the good parts to the very end of the story because there were just a lot of bombs of jaw-dropping moments as we were getting to the end of the book, which ended on a cliffhanger yet again. And I talked to Chelsea about this too. She even said that it was a little bit slower for her as well. So I at least know that I'm not alone. In this book, we're focusing on, like I said, the politics of building alliances and rebuilding society and just also getting ready for war. So it was slower paced, yes, but I don't regret reading this, is what I'm trying to get at. And I do recommend this series. I'm a little conflicted about how I feel at the moment. Brandon Sanderson was just put on such a pedestal with his writing and storytelling. And I'm not saying that it's bad. I just don't think it's as amazing as people have said it's to be. I don't see the glitter and glamour of his work. And also maybe that's because I don't normally read stories by male authors. Normally I read stories by female authors, and maybe that's why. I don't know. There's just a lot of maybes. However, I'm going to continue with the next book to finish this off with Chelsea. Watermoon by Samantha Soto Yumbao. This matches my dress just perfectly. Here, let me grab my cup of coffee. Ha! It's a blue day. It's a blue day. Anyway, this book, the less you know, the better. I think I knew little about what I was actually getting myself into, and honestly, the synopsis doesn't say much at all. I think this is one of the weirdest books that I've ever read. Let's backtrack a bit. This is a story about our main character. Her name is Hana. She owns a magical pawn shop. In this pawn shop, you're able to sell your regrets. You're able to sell those dreams that no longer serve you, that you want to get rid of, and you don't want to have to think about ever again. The main driving plot with this story is that Hana needs to find her father who is missing. So she goes into the multiverse where this magical pawn shop exists, and she goes off to try to find her father with a love interest that you do end up meeting. And it was just a wild, weird adventure. If you're a fan of Alice in Wonderland, if you like Spirited Away, or honestly any Miyazaki film, then you will enjoy this book. I personally think that it could have been a little bit shorter. We're just going on this adventure for so long that I felt like it wasn't going to end. This story made me reflect on how the paths that we choose affects our future, and just the regrets that we make based on the choices that we take. It's just such a fascinating story that made me think about what I've done in the past and my regrets and what I don't regret, and just how you have to choose to carry on with your life with those regrets that you have because you don't have a magical pawn shop. I don't have a magical pawn shop to go to. Would I recommend this book? It's more of a maybe. If you want a whimsical story that's just out of this world, then you should read this book. It is cozy, although there are some moments that were quite terrifying also. It's a very Studio Ghibli book. If you know and you've watched Studio Ghibli movies, then you'll know. You'll just know. I'm not sure if I mentioned this in previous reading vlogs, but I have been listening to the Hunger Games trilogy for the second time. I read them for the first time a very long time ago when I was a teenager. I'm prepping myself for Sunrise and the Reaping and Ballad of the Songbirds and Snakes, since I haven't actually read those books yet. So I wanted to do a reread, and I listened to the audiobook of all 3 of the books. I finished Mockingjay in May, and as expected, it blew me out of the waters. It was such a good book, and better than when I read it the first time. I feel like I can understand it more and what Suzanne Collins is actually trying to tell us, and more so than I did as a teenager. So I appreciated this trilogy a lot more, and I can't wait to continue with Ballad of the Songbirds and Snakes and Sunrise and the Reaping. This book was very good. This whole series, I'm just going to talk about it as a whole. If you've never heard of this series before, it's basically a dystopian series where our characters have to fight for their lives in front of a televised audience. So you're on television in an arena killing each other. A book very similar to this, which I think is just as amazing and honestly might be better than The Hunger Games, is Chain Gang All-Stars by Nana Kwame Adjei-Brenyah. I highly recommend this book, but let's get back to The Hunger Games. What I found to be most interesting in the series is just how our main character, Katniss Everdeen, she has to make decisions based on what's going to be best for her, but also based on what's going to be best for her community and her district, and fighting for the greater good, especially when you have a government and social system that is corrupt. Such a wonderful series, and Suzanne Collins does a great job writing the story, but also it leaves us with some long-lasting, thoughtful impacts on how society is, how society can be, and there's a lot of correlations between what's happening in today with the government and in the series. Crazy. Highly recommend. Yes. It's funny that I mentioned that I don't normally read stories by male authors, and that is the case. But this month I read Shadow of the Gods by John Gwynne, the first book in the Bloodsworn trilogy, and this took me by surprise. When I tell you I've had this book for 2 years, I've had this book for 2 years. I've had this book for so long, just because I was so intimidated, since this is an epic fantasy. Literally, the back says, it's a Norse-inspired epic of blood and vengeance, and I was so overwhelmed. I didn't think that I was going to understand the story and also enjoy it, but that is not the case at all. Like I said, this is a Norse-inspired story in a world where monsters and gods used to roam the lands, and then they became extinct. Now we're following in this new world where humans are living with the monsters, and they're slowly coming back, and there's going to be a war brewing. I personally think that this book sets us up really well for the next book in the series. We follow 3 different characters, and I really enjoyed that because 2 of them were female, and I love strong female characters, and all 3 of the characters go on their own different paths until they intertwine. So majority of the story, it's almost 500 pages. We were reading from different point of views, and slowly their stories were converging, and it was very satisfying to see the end. I really like his writing style. This book is very bloody. It's very gory. There's a lot of violence and action happening in this book. If you like Game of Thrones, if you like Lord of the Rings, then you'll probably enjoy reading this book. When I was envisioning this world in my mind, I was thinking Legend of Zelda, Breath of the Wild, and especially with the monsters that we have in this book. So if you enjoy playing Legend of Zelda, then you'll probably want to pick this book up. Needless to say, I thought his writing style was easy to understand, especially with the world building that we have here, since this is an epic fantasy. He's giving us a lot of information, but I found it to be easy to digest. My only thing, an issue, is that there's a glossary in the back of the book, and it's hard to not spoil things for yourself when you're flipping to the back of the book each time to figure out what a word is. Since this is Norse inspired, there's a lot of different words that I don't know how to pronounce or definitions. So I had to check the glossary. I wish it was in the front of the book. Anyway, though, I really enjoyed this and I can't wait to pick up the second book. Now let's talk about the romance books that I read in May. We're starting off with Stay in My Swamp by G.M. Ferry. Yes, there is a sequel to Get in My Swamp. Logan and I were reading these books as a joke, and we had to just continue with the series, unfortunately. So context, the first book, Get in My Swamp, I gave it a 1 out of 5 stars. It's so bad. The series, I wouldn't even say series, a duology maybe? I don't know. These are short stories, less than 200 pages. It's basically a Shrek retelling and just written really poorly. It's so bad. It's so bad and very spicy. I have nothing else to say other than that. We picked up the second book, Stay in My Swamp. I listened to the audiobook for both of those books. I listened to it on 1.5 speed and it took me an hour and a half. And I wish it took me less time than that. I'm just being mean now. I'm sorry. Reading is subjective. Gotta tell myself that. If you just want a mindless time, I guess, read these books, but I don't recommend them. A book I do recommend, though, is Wild and Wrangled by Lila Sage. This is the last book in the Rebel Blue Ranch series. An end to a beautiful, beautiful series. I give this whole series a 5 out of 5 stars. I was waiting for Cam and Dusty's story since the beginning. Since Done and Dusted, I needed this. I needed this so much, and I'm so glad it was written so well. We have a second chance romance with forced proximity. Cam comes back to Meadowlark to start fresh again after she gets, I don't want to spoil anything, so I'm not gonna say it. But she comes back, and Dusty is single, and they're neighbors, and that's all I'm gonna say. It's so good. It's written really well, and I just love Dusty as a main male character. I loved him from the beginning. He is so sweet. He is an acts of service. He is a gift giver. He just cares so much for Cam, who is his first and only love. It's beautiful. I also really like Cam. She's not my favorite female character in this series, but I have a place in my heart for her. I have empathy for her. If you haven't read it yet, read this series. It's interconnected, so you don't have to read them in order, but I recommend you read them in order to get the full Rebel Blue Ranch experience, because there's just so much familial love in each story. And what I love most about this series as a whole is that every time I pick up one of these books, I feel like I'm home again. I feel like I'm back at Rebel Blue Ranch, and there's something so sweet about it. Lila Sage has written some beautiful stories, and it's in my heart. It's just in it. It's just in my heart. Great Big Beautiful Life by Emily Henry. I already gave you my thoughts in a reading vlog, so I'll briefly just share here. I loved it. There were a lot of mixed reviews. Luckily, I'm one of them that really enjoyed it. I am a pretty fast reader. However, with this book, I took my time. I savored the pages, and I think that helped. And it also helped that I shut out the clutter and shut out the comments that other people were saying. I 100% think that this is still a romance book. I do think it can be categorized as a woman's fiction, but it is more so a romance. It is a love story between Alice and Hayden. It's a love story between Cosmo and Margaret, and it's also just a heartfelt mother-daughter love story between Alice and her mother. So there's a lot of love elements, both romantic and not, woven into the story, which is what makes me still say that this is a romance. Basically what the story is about is Alice and Hayden are both competing to tell the story of the heiress Margaret, and Margaret gave them each a month to interview her alone and create this story, so that after this month, Margaret's gonna decide who's going to tell her story. And what I really liked about this is that, yes, it is a small town, and Hayden and Alice are constantly seeing each other and chatting it up. So there's this slow buildup of friendship, which I love a friends to lovers. I really love when there is a slow burn within this story, and it is so freaking slow. The flame is flickering. It's just so light before it gets so bright. I loved that aspect. And I also really enjoyed Alice as our main female character. She's funny and spunky, and she has her own insecurities, so it makes her feel so real, and that's what Emily Henry does well. She creates characters that we can relate to. She creates characters and a story that is more so real. Obviously, I just said that. It's good. It's so good. It's so beautiful. It definitely is a reminder how great, big, and beautiful our life is. I recommend this book, but I can maybe see why people don't love it. Maybe not though. No surprise here, if you watched a previous reading vlog, you will know that I DNF'd Silver Elite by Danny Francis. Oh my gosh, the drama with this book. I have theories too. None of the theories that I can claim that I came up on my own. These are just stuff that I found scrolling TikTok, but this book is bad. Listen. Good books have standards. All books should have standards. And to be a good book, you have to have certain standards. I personally don't know how people are giving this a 5 stars. This book is so bad. Let's backtrack a second and reel it in here. I DNF'd this book at 30%. I didn't make it very far. I thought it was so boring. The writing was bad. I don't know, part of me makes me think that it was written by AI. However, I don't think Penguin Random House would publish a book and say that it's by a well-known, famous author, because if someone ever found out that it was written by AI, there would be so much backlash. So I do think that a human wrote the series. I just don't know who. And if this author is not debut and has written a bunch of series before, maybe this is a genre they should write about, because they just missed, totally missed, and I am never going to listen to a book talk hyped story ever again. I keep being burned. I keep being burned by all of these book talk popular stories. Anyway, so I'm glad that I DNF'd it. We need to DNF books more often. That's the thing. Takeaway from this video, DNF more often. Other than that, I thought that May had a lot of really good books that I read. A lot of favorites, a lot of books that I didn't regret, just good books in general. It was a good month. I would say that my top book for the month would be, one second. Okay, can I have 2 contenders? Wild and Wrangled, and then Great Big Beautiful Life. They were both so good. And also Saving Face by Muncie Shaw. Such a good one. Such a good one. All right, I will see you in another video next week. Have a great day. Bye.